This is the Biz News Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
Welcome to the world of 2024 and the seemingly everywhere fake it till you make it people, the win-at-all-cost politicians, plain old-fashioned hucksters. Surrounded by armies of crooks and charlatans, what can the average person do? Cynthia Hetherington has some ideas. The cybersecurity expert joins us for this episode of Bizgnus Interviews. Well, here we are in the sprint toward the conclusion of the 2024 presidential campaign that seemingly began about 5 centuries ago, based on how tired people are of hearing about it. But part of that has been disinformation, not just propaganda, which sounds pretty clumsy, but very skilled disinformation. You have been looking into that. Tell us about the problem, and then we're going to get into how it's solved.
I think, and thank you for asking, the role of disinformation in America's current election process, in a way, is very helpful because it's really putting a pin on a problem that people are being subjected to every day and they don't realize it. The cancer in the network I could refer it to is the abuse or misuse of technology to mislead the minds and hearts of individuals. So an election in our country is a very important privilege that we have. And if our ideologies are being skewed from what's being forced on us 6 hours more a day through the internet, then we're going to vote with what that tells us. However, we might be being fed misinformation, bad data, or biased thoughts.
And some of it very cleverly concocted, some would say by the Russians even.
Well, we wouldn't say, we would actually prove. We have data points that show where nation states are deliberately infiltrating networks such as social media and planting data in there to align with whatever they want to upset. Now, let's be crystal clear on this. It's not like Russia saying, we want you to vote Republican, we want you to vote Democrat. They put misinformation in both camps. They deliberately put misinformation in both camps because they just want us to argue amongst ourselves. So the idea is just to create general discord in Discord, and then we start arguing amongst each other and we lose sight of the fact that we shouldn't be fighting each other. We should be fighting what is communism or ideologies that don't align with the American systemology that we've had for over 200 years.
Used to be, we would have the daily newspaper, maybe morning and afternoon. We'd have one newscast at night on TV, and we'd have regular radio newscasts, all feeding fairly unbiased information to the American people. Now, however, you have the internet, you have TikTok, you've got Instagram, you've got this, you've got that. How on earth are we supposed to be able to parse out what is true and what is false?
I'm going to roll back to prior to being an investigator and put on my librarian hat, because my roots are, I am a librarian, master's of library science, and it's the original misinformation to understand the source of information. So in a nutshell, I'm going to help listeners know how to find good source data for whatever conundrum or problem. We talk about, again, the election as being a good example of our biases being swayed based on what we're reading and seeing. But in all news and in all information, we should understand how to get to the source is to understand where the data comes from. You refer to the nightly news or the morning broadcast being a somewhat believable tale of whatever was being spilt over into our ears. And at the time, that was news reporting. Since probably about the mid-1980s to early 1990s, it became op-ed. It became broadcasters talking about what was coming out in the print, which was considered the source information at the time. So you wrote an article, it had to be as close to data and truth as possible. But if you were on TV talking about it, it was an opinion and an editorial. And the UK has had this, they've only transitioned over since about 2010. Then you'll actually see broadcasters picking up newspapers and talking about it with the paper in their hand, like what I would see would be the Today or morning shows. How do I get to the real information? I have to consider where the source is. Anytime someone says, well, they said this, the they is the thing that I have to question.
I'd like to meet the they people one of these days. They must be a big family.
Well, when I was a child and my grandmother would come up to me and push a glass of orange juice in my face, I said, well, why am I drinking orange juice? She said, well, they said it's good. It has vitamin C. Well, who are they? I'd ask my grandmother, who are they? And it was the person on TV. My grandmother couldn't possibly fathom in the, 70s and 80s that people on TV would lie to her. Now, fast forward 50 years, and we are still believing they, because they is the box. Even Doug, as a librarian in the 90s, I would have a patron that would come in and say, I want to know more information about this. Look in the box and find the answer. And by box, they meant, what did the computer tell me? It was they. That was the they then. Now it's sitting in the palm of your hand and it's a 3-second TikTok video.
And nothing can be learned in 3 seconds, I suppose, other than a hot stove.
Well, interestingly enough, TikTok is used in China, the founder and owner of that company.
Well, that might just add to our worries, to say the least. Now, as a former librarian, I guess you're never former, you always will be, I suppose. What skills need we develop to handle this flood of information mixed with information so we can be accurately informed as citizens?
The best way to understand and fight against this misinformation deluge on us is to go and question where that information is coming from and what the inherent bias is. Even if your parent is telling you something or that person in the community is telling you something, they're going to tell you this thing for a reason. Like, I don't know, you can hear a siren in the background. That is my community's way of alerting us that there's a fire and this is a call to firefighters, and kind of a blend into natural recording and what's happening. Do I question the siren? No. So the swan song or the siren call that we get on the internet on a regular basis, pulling us into the cliffs, we have to stop and say, what is the point of this document? Why is this person telling me to go in this direction? What should I need to know? We need to do our due diligence. We need to find the root of the information, and then we can either just choose to trust or not trust it.
As a retired editor, we would have reporters spend days, weeks, in a few cases, trying to get to the heart of a story before they wrote it, just to get the facts. Today, how are we supposed to do this in microseconds, it seems, as ordinary citizens?
Well, it's ordinary citizens that are challenging the publishers of today. So we'll watch a catastrophe roll out on TV live. And my first, as an open source analyst, as an OSINT analyst, my first thing is I start going into the chans, boards, message accounts, for lack of it, I'll go on X and I'll start looking for who's talking about this tragedy that just occurred. Eventually a name is going to drop. Now that's an unverified source. That's rumor. That might be a first person account. That could be someone who has direct knowledge of the event and the occurrence, or it could be a rumor mill, which is very clearly happening and just happened in our recent assassination attempt. There was one person who got named and his name got spread very quickly as the target of the investigation, where it was completely inaccurate. He did post a video prior to it, sharing his angst and anger, and it was an assumption, but people were running with it. You know who wasn't running with it? Legitimate journalists. They were taking in news and vetting and verifying in a traditional way to say, it seems like it could be, but we are still checking our sources. There's still an editorial process with the larger networks. We might not agree with it, but it's still there and it's still happening. But for open source intelligence analysts who have to get in and run intel reports, we're running into Twitter, we're running into Facebook, we're looking at Instagram, we're checking TikTok.
Oh, wow, you must have memberships all over the place. How on earth did you transition into this from being a librarian?
Well, understanding information sources down to the data points has really always been my expertise, and that's what we're trained as librarians, are taught how to find, resource, disseminate, answer questions, everything to do with data and information. We know how to store it. We know how to archive it. We know how to throw it away. We know when it's too old. It's called weeding. You're weeding the collection. You're realizing that this is no longer of value anymore. In some ways, we looked at search engines right now. What do we weed out in our search engine catalog? Oh, we can never get rid of Google. Everybody uses Google. Or is the new ChatGPT search engine going to be a challenge to it? So what resources are and aren't? I knew that was coming. I've known that information was the one powerful tool. That's the asset and the bullet and everything else that matters in our community from 1992. And I just took that by admission and realized instead of giving it away for free, I'm going to start billing for it, and got my private detective license and ended up transitioning into the intelligence field almost immediately.
Well, who are your customers?
Hetherington Group helps and serves the Fortune 50. We manage the world's largest brands, concerns, and issues for them on a daily basis. We could do anything from digital vulnerability, where we monitor where their brands and names are being mentioned or leaked and could cause harm to person, property, or reputation, as well as handling trademark issues and making sure that people's trademarks are, where they belong, to whom they belong, as well as training. We have a huge training arm where we're teaching other people our tradecraft, because especially with transitioning military and law enforcement, there's over 700,000 seats in the United States that need to be filled. And we have a grant with the NSA and Dakota State University to help them get out of that role and get into a new role. And, cops go to class for free. They learn how to do this work and they're really enjoying it. We've transitioned 300 professionals already.
That sounds like not only profitable, but very worthy work that you're doing.
It's the heart of what we do here. We have an expression called OSINT for good, and it's about using our tradecraft to make the world a safer place. So from my two seats, both as the company CEO, what does the work, the tradecraft training, the instruction, and is the banner holder for what open source intelligence means, to Osmosis, the association for our members, the fraternal organization where we all can gather, share, and trade ideas and new technology, setting boundaries, setting standards, understanding what the ethics are behind this, because there is none. As you're talking about misinformation and disinformation, there are no laws, rules, or guidelines for how we do our jobs. It's all based on the brightest light in the room. And Osmosis will be that brightest light so that we can have a good product going forward for our customers while not harming others.
Give our listeners and viewers a way to get in touch with you, perhaps a website.
Well, if you're interested in the tradecraft and learning more about what we do, maybe you're a desktop detective, you know yourself if you listen to a lot of murder podcasts, and Dateline is getting recorded tonight. That's the OSINT Academy, OSINT Academy.com. If you're already in this tradecraft and you just want to find out how to get deeper into this and learn more, then come to osmosisinstitute.org. And you could find me on my company website at hetheringtongroup.com, or just reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Before we conclude, I want to get some of your thoughts about artificial intelligence, and I'm afraid of the term almost, deep fakes.
The AI world and deep fakes is just another reach. It's actually a more proficient and efficient way of doing misinformation and disinformation campaigns. In its most positive light, it is a wonderful infusion of technology and a big refresh that we've needed in this space for the last 10 years. The internet's been somewhat stagnant once social media really joined and got very prevalent. We've just sat there talking to each other. Now we have something we can actually do. And as the internet was disruptive to business and journalism in the 90s, this is the AI world and the creation of content, i.e. deep fakes, is disruptive to our process now. We have to wrangle and learn how to manage, how to verify, vet, and use this tool to our best advantage. So I don't look at it as a negative, I look at it as an opportunity. I mean, heck, if a librarian could say, hey, the internet is this big disruptive thing in the 90s, and all of a sudden I've got a very successful detective agency and an association, books written, awards on the wall, you know, that's just me taking advantage of the technology given. Who is the me of then? I would like to know that. I would like to know who are the junior detectives out there, or maybe you're a new title and a new name. Maybe you're going back to the library world. What are you going to do with AI, and how are you going to make a profession out of it? And how do you make a career? How do you get yourself on a podcast like this 20 years from this start date?
And one last thing we always ask, and that is, what would you like to talk about that I have not asked you?
Only add that we should take every day in each journey as a mission. The person who is not mission oriented, and that just could be, your mission could be to make your family better, to make your health better, to make your business better. But sticking with the business mindset, my company is run on one principle. And when I lose my North Star, I lose everything. So I grip this North Star, sometimes like an anchor and sometimes like a balloon. The mission of my company is to make the world a safer place. Every day I wake up and I ask myself, how can I make the world a safer place? How can I use OSINT for good to drive my teams, my company, all those people that follow me? How do we do that? And, you know, sometimes you have a really stinky day, but if you know that even if you moved that needle a microsecond ahead towards your mission, we're good.
You've been listening to the Bizgnus Podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@bizgnus.com. That's BIZGNUS.com. Thanks for listening.